And again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal. Three in the face. 1-1. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right, we're back on a Tuesday night after we missed the last couple games. I guess we just missed the last game, the Las Vegas game, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, good games to miss. To be fair, Ducks dropped 2 straight against Vegas in not so fun fashion, and figured that if they had a chance to come back here and have a fun game and a game that was worth watching, it would be this game against the Kings. And this might have been the worst of them all, because I mean, at least when you lose to Vegas, you're like, okay, it's Vegas. They're one of the best teams in this league. When you lose 4-1 to the LA Kings, who are basically just as bad as you, and it's still a rivalry game, it hurts. It hurts a lot.
Yeah, when they can't even get going for that, like, I mean, it's not the 4-game series that they're going to have, but it was kind of like the prelude to it. So you kind of hope that, you have a little bit of oomph instead of just running through what seemed like a practice of a game, and to just go out there and lose on every facet of the game and just get the crap kicked out of you physically and on the scoreboard. That was boring and depressing to watch.
Yeah, that was probably the first game in a minute where I thought you could make a reasonable argument during the game to fire the coach. I really haven't been on the fire Eakins thing that much this year, just because it's such a weird year and he was handed such a shitty roster. But it's kind of ridiculous to me. Goddamn. Tonight they just looked really bad. They just looked really... Sorry,
I could tell this one is just hitting you hard.
Yeah.
No, it's just so... And
Happy
they looked so
420,
lifeless
everyone.
tonight. And it was very frustrating to watch. They just didn't look like a team that had any energy tonight. And it was just kind of remarkable.
Yeah. I said this...
Much like this podcast.
Yeah. It's tough, because I said this before we went live, where... For a while, like, the Ducks have been bad all year. Like, this is nothing new. It's not like all of a sudden, they've popped off a bad losing streak here after playing really well. But the luster and kind of the shine of Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale making their NHL debuts, and Drysdale scoring in his debut, and Trevor Zegras also grabbing his first NHL goal in the same game, that's kind of worn off now. And now it just gets back to sucking again, right? Like, there's nothing to gloss it over. Like, the 2 wins against San Jose were fun, and it's San Jose, so it's great. This month hasn't been that good at all, and then you get kind of taken back down to earth against Vegas, which is understandable, but now it's kind of washed away. And if you had to pick a game all year to say this was a bad game from Jamie Drysdale, I think this is one you could say. I mean, plus minus is plus minus. It's not a great stat to begin with, but he was a -4 tonight.
Perfect. It's the only stat that matters.
Yeah, tonight it's the only stat that matters for my agenda on this podcast. But Drysdale was a -4 tonight, so it's just one of those games where nothing went right. And then the one thing we're supposed to be enjoying right now is the kids. And the only kid we have in the lineup had a bad night. And then if you want to go and extend it down to San Diego too, the goals won 5-1, but Trevor Zegras was pointless. So it was just just an awful night all around. Just make it a full downer podcast.
Yeah, we just got to focus on the end of the season. Just get to that finish line. We don't have to win. We just got to get there. So we just physically have to wait for days to pass, and then we can start getting happy again. Because there's not a whole lot to look forward to, unfortunately. This is sad, but it is true.
That's the big takeaway right now, is that Ducks fans have nothing to look forward to but the slow passing of time.
nine games left.
Date on the calendar, season end.
Well, it's like you come
again.
off a game like this, and then you look at the schedule, and you look at your next opponent, and it's Vegas again on Saturday.
So That's the thing, right? Like, we're gonna find out pretty quick what tonight was, right? Because, like, in a normal season, these games happens. You have letdown games. You have games where nobody shows up. It stands out all the more because they never looked particularly good this season to begin with. But I think that Vegas game will kind of tell us a lot about kind of where this team's head is at. I think, if they think they come out and they put up a good effort, and, I don't expect them to win, but if they at least play something that looks like structured hockey, I think that's a positive sign. And if they come out and it's just this shit again, then one, it's going to be a bloodbath. But two, then I think at that point you really do go, okay, well, the season's almost over. Get everybody the hell out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll save you the suspense. It's going to be a horrible game. I'm gonna play the role of Pat here for a second. They're not going to do crap, and they're definitely not going to turn the boat around here against Vegas. I would just assume just get that loss out of the way, and then if they can't muster up any sort of energy against a 4-game series against the Kings, whether it be on the scoreboard or hell, just hitting people and not being hit or not being punched out of the game. That would be something to cheer for. If you're going to lose the game on the scoreboard, at least be physical. And is there any team that we should be more physical against? Would be the Kings, is who I would expect us to be. Didn't see it today, and hopefully a 4-game mini playoff series might actually kick their asses awake. But I wouldn't hold my breath on Vegas.
I think that's right. I think the fact that it did kind of show like this against LA is especially frustrating, because even when the teams are bad, we've seen in the past these games have a lot of energy. Hell, we've seen it this year. These games have had more energy than tonight, and tonight was just one-sided from the jump. And you're right, that the fact that it was against LA, I think, is a very bad sign.
Yeah, but that upcoming 4-game stint against LA should be better. Like, maybe games 1 and 2 might be a bit slow, but I think when you get into game 3 and 4 of that mini series, then we might see it ratchet up a bit. In those last couple games will be pretty fun. And then you head out on the road and face 2 teams fighting for playoff spots in St. Louis and Minnesota at the end of the season. So we'll have to end it that way. But at least maybe a couple of those games against the Kings will be some fun ones.
Yeah, well, and then the other thing I guess to say, to play like devil's advocate for a second, is it is the end of the season. The trade deadline is done, so none of them are playing, for the chance to go start somewhere else. There's only a handful of games left. It's very clear that they are going to be one of the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the league. And to start all of that, the season has just completely sucked from what they've had to deal with and the COVID and, everything going on, and the way that nothing, has been normal for a year. I think all of that can lead to a situation where even if they are a little, just kind of ragged and lifeless here at the end of the year, I think there's something to be said that it isn't necessarily a sign of the worst case scenario inside the room, but it's definitely still a thing to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, losing games isn't a bad thing for the Ducks right now either. When you look at, Buffalo has actually kind of picked up their play somehow as of late. They've been winning some games. New Jersey probably played the most exciting game of the entire season tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they were down 6-0. The game finished 7-6. It was 6-0 after the end of the second. So they're fighting to just kind of finish the season on the high. Detroit, despite losing today as well, has picked up a few wins lately. So the Ducks, if you want them to be in the best position possible for the draft, they need to finish in the bottom 2, because Seattle's going to hold that third best odds no matter what. So even if you finish third last in the league this year, you automatically have the 4th worst odds. You could fall as far as 6, which is probably something that usually happens. When you're in 3, 4, 5, you usually fall at least 1 or 2 spots, because somebody wins the lottery and kind of pops up in that top half of the draft. So at best, I mean, it'd be good for the Ducks to at least catch New Jersey or Ottawa. Buffalo's going to be tough because they're just on a whole nother level, but
we can't even catch Buffalo.
Yeah.
Damn it.
we'll see. But
The other thing,
go ahead.
sorry, I just want to say, like, it's also worth noting, like, as bad as the Ducks look tonight, the Kings didn't necessarily look markedly better except for small moments. This was a game that didn't hit 40 total shots at the 50-minute mark. Like, I just think that's also something worth remembering, is it wasn't a game like we could see when they play Vegas.
Yeah, it
So,
wasn't a 51 to 16 shots.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you're not shooting, you're not scoring. Be hitting. Be in a fight. Be something where you're
for
not,
sure.
losing. That's just what's so fucking boring to watch. It's just go like, oh god, we're just getting our asses kicked, and then we can't even defend ourselves. Guys getting knocked over. Guys can't. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
around.
I think
No,
the
yeah.
big thing too is that there's really no excuses lineup wise. Like mostly everybody is healthy at this point, barring Hampus Lindholm and then Isaac Lindstrom, who I finally found out what was wrong with him. I don't think it had been put out anywhere, or I likely missed it. But Eric Stevens mentioned that he had an appendectomy. I don't know how long ago, but that's why he's been out of the lineup and been listed as a scratch for the last couple of games. So apparently he's back skating again. But other than him and Lindholm, this is as good as it gets for the Ducks lineup. When you look at who they iced tonight, the lines were the same from the 5-2 loss against Vegas, except for Volkov and Jones switched. So Jones went down to the fourth line. Volkov came up with Getzlaf and Terry on the second line. And then Andy Walensky checked back in for Jacob Larson to play with Cam Fowler tonight. But and then Anthony Stolarz was a starter, giving John Gibson the night off after two tough games against the Vegas Golden Knights. But this is a healthy Ducks roster. This is what a healthy Ducks roster looks like. Outside of, like I said, Lindholm, Lundestrom, and maybe Zegras, who should likely be up at this point or could be up by the end of the year.
How many games does he have left before they don't burn that 1 year off?
The Ducks have, I think we counted 9 games to the end of the season, so he could play every single one of those 9 games and fall, I think, at 26 games played, and it was 27 to hit the accrued season. So he could be up for Saturday.
Any day now. Any day now.
We'll see. I mean, he's been, other than tonight, he's been performing at a high level for the goals. 2 games ago, he had 4 points. Then he had that highlight reel goal that went viral, where he batted in with the toe of his stick off a breakaway. So he's clearly bored in the AHL. So,
God, man, it's insane. Just how at ease he looks down there. The game just seems to move so much slower for him than everybody else. It's insane.
well, I can say, I mean, his transition to center is clearly going pretty well. So,
Hey, okay.
Yeah.
we might see him later on in the year. I don't want to spend too long on this game, to be honest with you guys. You know, like Jason said, the Kings' goals weren't that great. You know, first one off of Grundstrom's back, the other 3 from Kopitar. On the breakaway, beat Stolar's 5-hole, the cross-ice path to Athanasio for an open net shot, and then the rebound that fell to Lizotte in the third period. They weren't wonderful goals, I felt, for Anthony Stolarz in this one. There wasn't too much he could do on any of them, really. And then obviously the Ducks got their lone goal through Cam Fowler, which was a nice individual effort from him to get on the board. But outside of that chance from Fowler, really the only other chance they had was Henrique at the end of the second, where Doughty dove and blocked it. And they didn't really have too many scoring chances outside of those 2 big chances, and one of them they scored off of.
And it makes it more annoying that it was Doughty making a good play, because you're just like, damn it. Like, I mean, that could have really helped us. And then it's like, of course it's fucking Doughty doing it. And it's like, oh, yeah, yay. So you got hit in the chest. That's awesome. Great for you. I don't know. That was just me being bitter, I guess, for a moment. But I was just like, you got to be shitting me, man. So let us have that one.
Yeah, I think there was a positive with, like, Fleury had that nice little move behind the net, and then he took a rush up ice, and he just missed, but he was aiming top corner, and, like, you're gonna miss high on that. So, I think there were little things like that, I think, that you can be happy about, but I think it's hard to find too many positives to take out of this game. But I think by that same token, we don't know until the Vegas game if we should even give a shit about this game. There's a good chance that we see enough in the Vegas game that we feel like you can just kind of throw this one out. So
we're getting to that point in the season. I mean, obviously these games don't mean anything. The Ducks are likely a few more losses away from, officially and mathematically being out of the playoffs. I think there's some guys in San Diego that I know a lot of people want to see get at least one look this year. Dave asked a question in the chat about Ole Eriksson Ek and Lucas Dostal. And with the OHL season being canceled, Jacob Perreault's another one who is going to be in San Diego for the rest of their season and could be an option. Do you think we see any of these guys near the end of the year here? Obviously, there's only 9 games left, and Trevor Zegras is likely one of those guys that's going to get called back up. Do you think either one of the goaltenders or Perreault gets a shot before the end of the year?
No,
I think Perreault does.
Yeah, I wouldn't think the goalies do. I think it's still, Gibson's net unless he starts dealing with an injury or something like that, and they want to bring in a third, technically their 4th string goalie, but they still have a couple of games from Miller to play if Gibby's not going to play. Stolzar is going to be the backup next year, so they probably still want to give him some more reps. And then other than that, they really wouldn't bring him in. I mean, we haven't even seen Stolzar until the injury, and then just throw him out there because what the hell, why not? And until he started playing really well, he wasn't really even there. Other than that, he was in taxi the whole season. So I can't imagine they jump over 3 goalies to just give that other guy a shot.
I would love it, though. I mean, Lucas Dostal has had the most interesting season I think I've ever seen from, not just a rookie goaltender in the AHL, but really any goaltender, where he started on a 5-game winning streak and had like 4 of those games were 40 save plus performances and looked amazing. And then he lost 7 in a row and it didn't look great. And now with his win tonight, it was a 37 save performance, only letting 1 goal. He's won 6 in a row. So he won 5, lost 7, and won 6 in a row. It's the weirdest start I've ever seen to a professional career. But he's coming on hot late here, and I know I see the same thing as you, Jay. Like, it's tough to leapfrog 3 guys to get a start here, where Gibson's healthy, Miller's healthy, Stolar's just playing games, and despite not looking too great tonight, he's been playing well. I would love to see Dostal get a start. I think he definitely would get a look over Ole Eriksson Ek, because Eriksson Ek's lost his last 3 in a row, and Dostal's kind of taking the starting job. But yeah, it's tough. Unless it's like the last game of the season, it's really tough to get him in there and give him a start.
So, I just don't think there's much of a point either, because what are you going to do? Bring him in on a team that's pretty much given up and their season's out? Yeah, let's throw the kid in there and see what he can do. Yeah, it's just it's not a good situation to do. At least the other guys had a chance during the season, and they're still trying to play.
So if you're Aikens right now, right, and this is where you're at in the year, do you just tell John Gibson he's done? And just be like, there's no reason to play you. Like, you've played enough games. We know there's absolutely, we know what you are. We're not tripping about like that. We don't gain anything by playing you here at the end. We're going to talk to Miller. You ask Miller, how many games do you want to play? There's 9. You can have as many as you. And then you give the rest to, Stolarz. At this point, doesn't it almost make more sense just to put...
If you want to piss off a goalie, I think if you went to Gibson and said, hey, Gibson, the season's kind of over. We're not doing anything. We'd like to give Stolzar, do you mind sitting out for the next, month or so, or, half a month? You're going to get a goalie that's going to be like, no, I want to play. That's what I'm here for. I don't want to sit down. Yeah, we're not going to win, but, or go to the playoffs, but I want to play. That's why I'm here. And that's any player. It's just like, Getsy, why don't you just sit down? We're not really going to be playing all that well, and you can just take a break for the next 9 games.
But it's different for Getsy than it is for Gibby. The situations aren't the same. Getsy's at the end of his career. Okay. Gibby's still got...
Insert Silverberg or whoever you want. I mean, does Gibson give him the best chance to win? Yes. Does Gibson want to play? Absolutely. So I just don't see why Gibson would just go, you know what, I'll just collect those checks and just sit back here for a little while and then go into a whole off season where I'm not playing either.
But that's my thing, is it's just getting a jump on the off season, which is inevitable. And at a certain point, if you're the coach or the GM, you're in charge. I do think it's worth just being we're not going to gain anything out of it. You've had a fuck all year because this year has sucked. We put you in a bad position, and we want you to just start your recovery. You're going to be around. We're not, shipping you off to Siberia, but you're not playing another game. And I just don't know what there is to lose in any way by that.
You get pissed off goalie.
Yeah.
And goalies don't want to sit. I mean, they want to play. They don't want to sit down. Just like, yeah, the season sucks, but I still want to play. And there's as much as you want to say, oh well, you get to train more, you get to do more in practice. It's nothing like a game, anyways. And you can work on little things within a game, even though the season's kind of lost. You want to be that guy. I mean, it's not necessarily an ego thing, but it's you're literally just saying, listen, we suck so bad, so why should you play? And so, well, then why should I play ever? We're just going to keep sucking so bad. Who cares? Why don't we just call it in halfway through the season? Every season, it's not going to be a gold rush for us. I just don't see it. I mean, almost no one ever does that. So,
like I see the where you're coming from, Steven, in shutting him down and not exposing him to kind of the shit show that he's been exposed to over the last few games and really over the entire season. But in the same thing, like what's the harm of playing him, 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 at most games for the rest of the season here? Like, even if he gets hurt and that's what you're afraid of here, he's got an entire offseason to recover. And I don't think you'd and what are you saving him for, right? Like, why are you not playing him? It's definitely not to avoid an injury, because the Ducks aren't going to need him anytime soon. They don't have any playoffs to worry about. Honestly, I think the way they handled the rest of these 9 games is they either give 3 starts to each guy, which I think would be a bit of a stretch, but I think likely it's Gibson for at least 4, and then Stolarz could get 3 or 4 in there, and then Miller gets 1 or 2, because there's a few back-to-backs in there. I think the last 2 games of the season are a back-to-back, so I'm sure Miller will get one of those, because Stolarz is fairly easy to move to the taxi squad. But I would assume Gibson would get at least 4 of these 9 starts to finish the season here, because they want him to finish strong. They want him to have a few good games here to finish the year, and finish the year on a positive note for himself. I think that's the big thing for him. Like, those were 2 very tough games against Vegas, and he played really well, especially in that 4-0 loss. He stopped like 47 shots and a .922 save percentage. He's playing well, and I don't think he wants to end the season. I don't think the Ducks want to end his season in that 5-2 loss to Vegas. I think they want to get him a few more games in here to have a positive end to his year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I understand like he's gonna want to play and all that stuff, but I think it's probably Miller's last season. How much does he want to play? And the other thing is, I would like to see a little bit more of Stolarz in this crazy situation. I would like to know, what he really might be, and I think just kind of throwing him into the deep end for the rest of the year is worth it. And I get that there's not a lot to be gained necessarily by starting his off season 2 weeks early or whatever it is, but I also don't know that there's anything to be gained by having him play those games. So that's my thing, is I just don't know that either way you're getting much out of it, and so I'd rather just see what Stolarz has.
I think an interesting thing, I want to get into this, I didn't have it in our post-game notes, but I was looking at some of the Ducks contracts, and what what's kind of changing for some of them heading into next season. And one thing I didn't notice about John Gibson's contract until I took a little bit of a deeper dive into it is he has a modified no trade clause that begins next season. So he has to submit a 10-team no trade list to the Ducks if they wanted to move him. There's been speculation since the beginning of the season, especially very early on in the season, that teams were inquiring about him. I can't remember the exact team now. It might have been It was Buffalo, right? Yeah, that called, and the Ducks basically said they weren't interested in moving him. But I think if there is any offseason or any time to move John Gibson, if you're seriously considering, and I'm not saying the Ducks are, but if you are, we're seriously considering moving John Gibson, I think this offseason is the best time, because you have the most leverage in terms of the amount of teams you can go out and offer him to, because I think the amount of teams who can pull it off in terms of the assets it would cost, and then also the need of a starting goaltender like John Gibson, the list already kind of starts small, and usually it's the teams near the bottom of the table in the league, teams like Buffalo, that are looking to kind of build from the net out. And I would think that at the beginning of next season, and Gibson has a modified no trade clause, Buffalo is likely on that 10-team no trade list for where he wouldn't want to go. If you had to trade John Gibson, do you think this offseason is the time to do it just because of that clause and it kicks in?
better have somebody to come in and replace him. Otherwise you're dooming this team. Or you're riding your hopes on Dostal making that transition to the NHL, and even then, you're still waiting 3 or 4 years on that hope. So I don't think the Ducks are in any position to get rid of an all-star goalie with no clear replacement in the wings yet. So I would hesitate to do that because I think it kind of cripples you a little bit. And I just, unless you're getting a guy who's really close as a return for a goalie, but then I think that diminishes your return prospect or draft wise. So, I mean, I guess that's the best they can do. If they want to move him, then sure, that makes sense. But I don't see why they would.
What about
No,
Ghost and Carter Hart for John Gibson?
no, I don't want Carter Hart.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from there, and I like the idea of bringing in a young netminder. I think Gostisbehere essentially is just to make the cap work at that point. So it really is just a one for one.
A good. I mean, I think you would have to throw in other stuff, but I think there would have to be a couple of picks involved there. But just as a structure, basically giving Philly a youngish goaltender who's the guy they hope Carter Hart turns into, for Carter Hart, whose timeline fits the Ducks much more succinctly, I guess.
Yeah, and Gibson's from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
There
he's
you
from
go.
Pittsburgh. There it is.
Yeah.
Sure, he's got a picture of him with a Philadelphia Flyers blanket and pajamas as a kid somewhere that we can post up somewhere.
Yeah. He was growing up in Pittsburgh. I'm sure that was it.
I think you've got a shot this offseason to get your best possible return for John Gibson. I think there's still a lot of people around the league who, rightly or wrongly, attribute most of this last couple of years to the team in front of him and not to John Gibson so much. So, I think every year that you give him kind of behind this team, you run the risk of people feeling that he's less and less deserving of the benefit of the doubt. So I think you have a shot. I think especially after the expansion draft, you might have a shot at getting a couple people in some weird spots who might be willing to make a crazy move. So I think, probably trading him at the draft this year, the entry draft, would probably make the most sense.
Yeah.
The return would have to be crazy.
Yeah. It would have to be, a first-round pick, a top prospect, plus on top of that. And I'm not saying I want to trade John Gibson. I'm just saying if you are...
No.
Yeah, if you're the Ducks and you're seriously thinking about it, this is probably the best time to do it. Not in terms of, his level of play and his numbers speaking for themselves, but just contract-wise and having the most suitors available. As hard as it is to move an elite goaltender already, because most teams already have an established netminder and they're not really looking to pay the assets to, for a small upgrade in net. And in some cases, John Gibson would be a big upgrade, but even then, if they're comfortable with who they have, it takes a lot of names off the board. And then you throw in a 10-team no-trade list to that as well. You could potentially wipe off the rest of the possible trade partners off that. I wonder if it changes your mind. I'm going to open up a lot of a deep wound and a debate that that a lot of Ducks fans hate to hear. But would you be more inclined to trade John Gibson this offseason if the Ducks went out and signed Freddie Anderson as an unrestricted free agent to replace him?
No. I think you even if you trade Gibson, you bring back Anderson, you're right back where it is. I mean, if anything, I feel like Anderson's been more injured over the last couple of years, although they've been using him like a workhorse even more than Gibson. But I feel he's injury prone, and then once again, in the same breath, he's not much of an upgrade or downgrade from Gibson. They're still kind of on par for the most part. I think Gibson's got the slight edge. But I just don't see getting Anderson and then getting rid of Gibson and going back on your idea that it might have worked, and they're right back where they are with not an upgrade in net. So
yeah, and honestly, for me, it's more so the argument a lot of people and why you shouldn't trade John Gibson is because there isn't a replacement in net or like an NHL starter behind him. Stolarz is not that. Dostal is not that yet. Ryan Miller is likely retiring at the end of this season.
So keep Gibson.
Yeah, but if you can get the assets,
if
you can get the assets that you want, like if you get the offer that you need to move John Gibson, and then it means
you doom this team to a 4-year rebuild, if that, and you're pinning it on hopes that your Dostal works out and whatever else you might be able to find along the way in the next 4 years.
But okay, so let me say this. I love it, Eddy. I think it's a great fucking idea. I think it makes a ton of sense logistically. I thought they should have looked into making that trade at the deadline and see what they could have gotten out of Toronto in swapping those back. I don't think it's in any way an admission that they made the wrong choice. I think it's in every way an admission or a validation of the decision they made. Because at this point in time, Freddie Andersen's reputation has taken a huge hit. He's consistently underperformed in, the playoffs and high leverage situations and things like that. Like, I know the team in front of him doesn't play a whole lot of defense, but at the same time, he plays for one of the highest scoring teams in the league, especially just on raw offensive firepower. Like, they can compete with anybody. So I think the fact that he hasn't had any success is ridiculous. I think, I think the idea of bringing him back on 3-year, $4 million a year, some stupid deal like that, getting Gibby out the door, getting a bunch of picks, seeing if you can get a couple of young players, I think that makes a ton of sense. Do I think Freddie Andersen is going to be super excited to come to Anaheim and have a young quote-unquote goalie prodigy behind him in the system? No, I don't think he's going to be super keen on that. But I definitely think that's a situation the Ducks should look into. But
well, should we also bring Carlisle back then?
I knew Freddie would.
Let's just double dip. And we'll just get everyone back. You say, what's Dan Bilesma doing? Can he still play forward?
Yeah,
I
knew Freddie would spark that, and I use Freddie simply just to kind of trigger people.
Here's
a little
the
bit.
thing.
But it could be anybody. It could be Antti Raanta. It could be Peter Mrazek. You know what I mean? It could be anybody.
Go out and trade for Braden Holtby. I don't care. I just think the idea in and of itself has merit. I think it makes a ton of sense because I love Gibby, man. And I want him to be able to go play somewhere and be successful. Like, I don't know that by the time this team is ready, he's going to be the goalie that he is today. And that sucks that his prime is going to be wasted because, Bob Murray just misjudged so many things over a 5-year period. Like, it just sucks ass. But the idea of I just think trading him makes a ton of sense. Like, he's right at probably his most valuable as far as age, contract, the flat cap, all of that stuff. I think the potential return on something like that is insane. And, like you said, Freddie's just a name to throw in the hat, but at the same time, like, Freddie's actually the perfect goalie to bring in for, a rebuild like that, because Freddie's just a ho-hum goalie. He's just like, it just is what it is.
To a 3-year deal, he's 34 at the end of the deal. You're likely,
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, like you said, picking the name Freddie makes it an entirely different conversation to everything Jay has said in the last 2 minutes. But I think the idea as it's structured has a lot of merit.
This is exactly why I wanted to ask this question on when Jay was on the show, because he's the perfect person to have to discuss it.
No, it's fine if you're being true to your heart and you outside of the nest, then by all means, if that's your goal, go ahead, get him out there, let him fly. He's got to be a peacock. You got to let him fly. So go right ahead. On a Ducks standpoint, you are pretty much signaling a white flag for the next 3 years. And then once again, Freddie's not the guy that's going to get you anywhere. And plug in whatever other name you want to put in there. No one's going to be better than Gibson. So trying to do that, and then once again, really, we're just pinning our hopes on Dostal. and hopefully that pans out after the 3-year deal. If we've still got Gibson, we've got a bona fide number one. You can move some of those other pieces around and try and build that team up. And a goalie has a better longevity than your casual player or forward or anything like that. So to just write him off by the time he's 29 or 30 and go he can't be a good goalie at that age. He still might be a great goalie, and he might be in that transition period where he's still leading, but Dostal's kind of coming behind him. But at least you have that opportunity in the next 3 years. Put it in Freddie and then wait until he's 34 or something like that, and he's not going to be better. He's going to be worse than Gibson. You just pretty much are just playing mediocrity for the next 3 years, hoping that Dostal works out. So I just don't understand why do that. Gibson's not really crushing you on the salary cap. You could still probably trade him. There's just 10 teams you can't trade him to. So
I guess my question is, what are your expectations for this team next year and the 2 years, like for the next 3 years? Because I don't think it's much different than what it is now, which is why I don't think it's worth keeping Gibson. I think they are a bottom of the West team for another 2 years.
Yeah, I think my hope is that everyone starts making, stepping up a little bit. We're obviously going to have to try and refigure out what we're going to do. There's a lot need to get plugged up, but we also gain a lot of mobility, fighting cap wise. Once Getzlaf becomes less expensive, once Perry's contract gets off the board, then you can maybe start going out and addressing some of those issues via free agency or maybe some sort of trade. Who knows what we're doing exactly with the GM or the coaching. I feel there's a lot of pieces getting into the right spot, and I feel the management is not steering the ship very well. And so that's why we're kind of stuck a little bit going in a circle. And I feel eventually that will get righted. I don't think it's them, but I think we can be far more competitive next season than this season. But it also comes down to, are we going to go out and get some of that free agency once the salary cap kind of moves out? But if you don't have a top goalie, then what's the point? Then just tank for 3 years, get 3 first overall picks.
I think where you fall on either side of this argument depends on two things, in my opinion. It's how long you think this rebuild is going to take for the Ducks, whether you think already it's going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and how important you think it is to have an elite goaltender to be a Stanley Cup contender and a competitive team. And I think those two factors weigh into it significantly. You can look at Tampa Bay last year, great team, but they had the best goaltender in the league. How much did that weigh into their victory? You could go back and look at, St. Louis or Pittsburgh when they won the Cups, and Binnington and Matt Murray are great goaltenders, but they got hot, and they got hot at the right time.
Is Matt Murray great?
But at the time he was, right? Not now with Ottawa for sure, but he was on a very good team, and he played well. And that's a debate that will continue to live on, and how important is it to have an elite goaltender. I think it helps, and obviously the better goaltender you have, the more likely you are to have a consistent run of form that gets you to the Stanley Cup and to eventually winning it, right, and winning it all. But the rebuild thing is the big one for me. I think already, as where the Ducks stand with or without Gibson, are 3 years away at the very least from being a decently competitive team that could win a couple rounds in the playoffs. And then if you're going to say Stanley Cup contending team, unless they luck out and get a franchise player in one of these drafts, a Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid type player, Austin Matthews, something like that, whether Shane Wright or Connor Bedard or whatever turns out to be that guy, I think they're 4 or 5 years realistically away from being one of those teams that can kind of compete to get to the conference finals and to the Stanley Cup finals. And Gibson's 32 at that point. And I think, yes, goaltenders have, longer longevity in terms of how long they can be good and how long they can stay competitive, but that's not the same. And I think when you look at Gibson's workload over the last couple of years, the style of play that he has, he just seems to me as a goaltender that won't be the same guy we have now into his early and late 30s, around 32, 33, and we're looking at potentially a Sergei Bobrovsky type, I don't want to say meltdown, but shift in form where he goes from being one of the top goaltenders in this league to he's all right, he's still good, but he's not that guy that we thought he was. And I see the same eventually for Andrei Vasilevsky as well, the way he plays, the style he plays. I just don't think that's gonna last into his 30s. And,
You don't think he's going to make behind-the-back glove saves for the next 10
listen, I
years?
could be wrong. That's my opinion. That's why I'd lean on the side of I'd be okay with trading John Gibson. I'm not actively saying we should trade him, but just based on those two things, I think the rebuild's going to take a little bit longer. And I think when you get to a point where you're competitive again, I don't necessarily think it's of the utmost importance to have an elite goaltender in your system when you can get assets for one right now and you can figure it out down the road. Now that could blow up in your face and you could be the one thing you need to push over the top is an elite goaltender and you traded it away. I can see both sides of the argument there for sure.
Small market team, and you get rid of a goalie who's probably your best chance at winning almost any game over the next 3 seasons, and you try and just dump that off for someone kind of in the middle. It's going to be hard to put butts in seats, and so it's going to be hard for them to want to do that in the first place. And quite honestly, without Gibson in there to win these 1-0 games that he does so well at the beginning of seasons, you're gonna be hard pressed to. I mean, you're definitely going way down, and you're committed to the tank for the next 3 seasons. I don't think bringing in Freddie or anybody else is going to get you out of the cellar. Gibson can get you out of the cellar, can make you relevant, can kind of inspire at least a little bit of confidence moving forward. But once again, if you're completely committed to just sucking for the next 4 or 5 years, then by all means trade him. But I just don't think this franchise is in that position.
I feel like the thing is you can kind of compare a goaltending or a goalie in hockey to a running back in football. It is always better to have the most talented guy than not. But by that same token, there is a degree to which it is usually far more cost effective to have a replacement level guy making middling money and creating a system and a structure around them to minimize how much they actually need to do. And I think we've seen that with Matt Murray and with Jordan Binnington. But to Jay's credit, we have seen that in the other way with Toronto, with those mid to late 2000 aughts Sharks teams, they just never quite had that goalie that got them over the top. They had everything else. So you definitely run that risk because that needing a goal, a goalie can be a difference maker every single game. But I do think there's also a lot of evidence to suggest that having a star caliber goalie isn't necessarily the most efficient way of building a roster.
Yeah, we'll end it at this. I think it's always going to be that argument there, and if you need an elite goaltender or not is always going to be one that's going to be split. And you could look at the teams that are in the top half of this league right now, and it's fairly split. I mean, Toronto has replacement level goaltenders, and Jack Campbell and David Rittich now, and Freddie Anderson, who wasn't playing that great this year. And then you go to Winnipeg, they have an elite goaltender in Connor Hellebuyck. And you go to the East Division, New York and Washington and Pittsburgh, they don't really have an elite netminder. They have a little bit of a rotation of two good guys that they built a system around that are okay. You go to the Central, Tampa Bay has one of the best goaltenders in the league. Florida, Bobrovsky's been better this year, and I think, in his heyday, and not even that, even a couple of years ago, he was considered one of the best goaltenders in this league, but they've been leaning on kind of a committee there, and same with Carolina. And then you head to the West. Well, Vegas has Fleury, who I would still consider an elite netminder in this league. And then they've got an excellent 1B in Robin Lehner. And then Colorado has Grubauer, which I think he's kind of right in the middle of being a regular, who I don't even know if Grubauer is an elite netminder or not, or if it's just the fact that he's playing in Colorado and there's such a good team.
He's good. He's making steps. Yeah. I even liked him when he was in Washington. It's just he was behind Holtby, so he couldn't really get out of that before he went over to Colorado. And then he's just been injured a little bit, but Colorado's really good. But I think Grubauer, he's on the cusp of getting to that upper echelon as far as goaltending. athletics, I guess.
But it kind of just shows you the mix, right? And why it's always a pretty heated debate when you discuss goaltenders is, good teams in this league. It's a mix of replacement level goaltenders and elite level goaltenders, right? So.
Yeah, but once again, all of those teams have elite goal scoring and elite defensemen. We don't have any of that. And trading Gibby is not all of a sudden going to give us that. It's going to give us the possibility of prospects that might work out in that way. And it's just like, well, listen, unless those are in the pipeline, you got a good feel for that. I'd say keep the goalie because that at least gets you some wins in there. But
all right. Yeah, well, sure. You mentioned it with some of the young players and the prospects we have. We talked about Jamie Drysdale earlier in the show. I want to move into kind of a few topics about Drysdale because he's become a topic of discussion lately. Obviously, the OHL season's been canceled, so he's sticking around with the Ducks for the rest of the season here. But there's an article that was put out, I think, a couple days ago that kind of went against the grain in terms of what we've thought of Jamie Drysdale this season and talked about how he's been struggling lately and how he's been struggling really for most of his time with the Ducks. And I read through it, and it's a long article. It's on Pucks of the Feather if you want to go check it out. And I wouldn't say it's horrible, and I don't want to slander the author who wrote it, but it leaves out a lot of things, and it leaves it a lot up to analytics. And I think when you look at Jamie Drysdale as who he is and the type of player he is this year, he's the youngest player in the National Hockey League right now as a defenseman, which makes it even more difficult for him to adjust and play. And not only that, he's not playing like an 18, 19-year-old defenseman would. He's not playing 13, 14 minutes a night. He's playing 20-plus minutes a night for one of the worst defensive teams in the league. On a bad team, you're going to have bad underlying numbers. It's just how it works. Some players who can drive play will have better numbers than some of the guys on their team that can't, but more than likely, you take a bad team, and most of those guys are going to have bad numbers. And you take a player off that team, put them on a good team. Let's look at Yanni Hakopo with the Carolina Hurricanes. Look at his underlying numbers for the rest of the games this season after the Hurricanes finish the regular season. I guarantee you he will have some nice-looking analytics because he's playing on a great
Eddy
team.
Guarantee.
And you already look at the first, I think, 2 or 3 games he's played there. His numbers look significantly better than he was in Anaheim. Does that mean he's a better player in Carolina? No, he's the same guy, but he's playing in a better system, and a system that does well analytically and does well when you look at the numbers. And I think it's tough to judge Jamie Drysdale on that and that alone and say that he's struggling because he had, when this article was written, I believe he had 5 points in 14 games, which for an 18-year-old defenseman is not bad at all. And every game up to really maybe the last couple, he's looked calm, he's looked comfortable, his skating has been on full display. He does not look like an 18, 19-year-old defenseman. He looks like a guy who's, early 20s and has been in the NHL for the last couple seasons. And he really hasn't made too many noticeable mistakes. I know we picked apart a couple in this game, but outside of this game, there really hasn't been times you looked at Jamie Drysdale and said, "Man, what are you doing? Like, where were you on that play?" So I think it's a bit unfair to say that he's struggling if you're just taking into account, how bad his numbers are with Josh Manson and how bad his Corsi for percentages or his expected goals or his individual impact on the game, because this is a bad team. And he's a part of that, just as much as save percentage and goals against average are team indicative. And you can't really say a goaltender is bad because his save percentage is, John Gibson is a perfect example of this. Are we going to say John Gibson is bad because he has a .904 save percentage? Or is a lot of that...
Yes,
a lot of
that's exactly what we're going to do.
That's a lot of people will.
Or does a lot of that have to do with the team and the team he plays on and how bad they are and the system they play in?
Yeah, it's a small sample size for Drysdale too, so I wouldn't put too much weight in it early on in this career. So it's, if you want to try and sit there and pick apart, like I said, an 18-year-old kid and what he's doing is just, it's viewed almost everyone kind of sucks coming into the league. There's very rarely a Connor McJesus that comes out and just blows you away analytically anyways. It usually takes, one go around to kind of get it right. It might take a little bit longer for a defenseman, but does he have the skill set? Absolutely. If he's in a better position with maybe better line mates, it gets even easier for that. But, he's going to have a little rough start to the career just because of the position the Ducks are in. But you can't put too much in on this one season. Go, this kid's a bust.
Yeah, I think. I think the kid's incredible. Like, I do. I really, for any of the young guys, just don't care about their analytics this year. I think maybe, I guess what I should do is amend that to a degree to being more about Zegras and Drysdale. But as far as those two, I really just want to see how they do. Like, I just want to physically see how they exist on the ice in an NHL game. I think, you said it perfectly. The underlying analytics and numbers for the team are bad, and they're bad for the players because the team is bad. Like, that's just the way it goes. I think that's the reason, right, that you are certainly concerned with Aikens is because the underlying numbers aren't good. And, it's one thing to be a team that's playing well and doesn't have finishing talent. It's another thing entirely to be a team that's not good and not playing well. And being a 19-year-old defenseman who's already going to have a tough time just breaking in first, just based on, the fact that he's a smaller defenseman in a traditional, like, organization and things like that, I just think there's nothing I've seen from him that makes me nervous, and everything I've seen from him makes me incredibly optimistic. And 5-14 over a full season would put him on pace for right about 30 points, which as a 19-year-old rookie is pretty sweet. I don't know that there's, I guess it is just a little bit of a debate. How do you feel about it? Like, do you think the numbers should be better than they are right now, or do you just think he's 19 and he's going to get better?
I feel like it's a counterculture type thing. I was like, well, everyone says he's really good. Well, I'm going to find a way that he's really bad just so I can say, no, you guys are all wrong, and you listen to me. It's just like, watch the kid play. Yeah. You'll see everything you need to see this season.
I have no problems with exploring, looking at analytics and kind of exploring the other side of his game. And if you want to say he's struggling, I have no problem with that. I just have a problem when you're taking some base stats and then applying it to him and saying that he's struggling because of this, when you can directly correlate that to the rest of this team and say, yeah, the team's struggling as a whole. I think if you want to look at some individual stats that are, I guess, less team-based and more individual-based, you could look at, his zone exits, his transitions through the neutral zone, how many clean zone entries he's get, how accurate and how often does he get the first pass off. And you can kind of look at those, and if those aren't great, then you can start saying, okay, maybe he's struggling a bit. But for me, it always comes back to this. This is a kid who, without the pandemic, was 100% going to be playing in the Ontario Hockey League this year. There was no chance he was going to get any sniff of playing with the Gulls unless it was a playoff run, and there was absolutely no chance he was going to play any NHL games with the Anaheim Ducks this year. So anything right now, his rookie of the month in February in the AHL, and then the fact that he's never looked back and he's been playing with the Ducks ever since and has been playing 20+ minutes a night. This is all just bonus time for us to be able to see money. Jamie Drysdale do this. So you can look at and say, if those stats that I talked about, the things that are a bit more individual based, even if those aren't great and you want to say he's struggling, for me, I can't buy into that, because I always come back to the fact is this is a kid that should have been in the OHL this year. And the fact that he's playing in the NHL and he's playing that many minutes, his skating is on full display. He doesn't look out of place. He doesn't look like an 18-year-old, 19-year-old defenseman in the National Hockey League. Doesn't look like the youngest player currently playing in the National Hockey League right now. He looks like a guy who's been here for the last couple of years, and he's only 14 games into his NHL career. So I can't buy into the struggling thing right now. It'd be different if the Ducks were one of the top teams in the Western Conference, and he wasn't looking great, and the rest of the team was. And then you could chalk that up to just rookie mistakes, and that's what we would be doing right now. And I think this article wouldn't exist if the Ducks were good. It would be Drysdale's, rookie mistakes or whatever, or he's just clearly not ready for the National Hockey League. Send him back down to the AHL or whatever. So I feel like it's a bit unfair to tag it with him struggling just because he's, on par with the rest of this team. And then the fact that they're struggling. We're playing Andy Belinsky and Jacob Larson on a nightly basis. Like, he's going to struggle in a defensive core that is rolling those guys out every night.
Don't take away our one happy thing that we have. So just leave us alone.
Yeah, it's just that you're just talking about like the numbers and stuff, because the other half of this has been, some of the boys that crashed the pond have been talking about splitting up the pair with him and Manson, and I thought it was really interesting. Jake wrote an article that kind of touched on it, and he looked at his numbers, and I looked at the numbers, and I thought the thing that was most interesting is when Manson and Drysdale are together, it's very low event hockey. The numbers don't favor them, and they're losing the shot battle and the chance battle, but overall the game slows down and it becomes much less eventful. Whereas when Drysdale plays without Manson, his numbers improve. He seems to be able to drive play a little bit better, but the total number of events in the game go up. So even though his percentages are better in a high event, I think it's also easy to look at that and see why a coach who was an NHL level defenseman would definitely be inclined to play him with the player that is seeing just less things happen. And I think, as a traditional coach or an old school coach or an ex-player, like, I definitely understand why, to what you're looking at, the idea of just not having more things happen when someone is on the ice who's the youngest player in the NHL and possibly the best player at his position on the team already. I get why you would put him in that position. So I think the numbers, like I said, I don't really know that I care too much about his numbers this year, but I understand the way that people are interpreting them for concern.
I think the thing for me too is his role changed when he was put with Josh Manson. That's the big thing, is all of a sudden Drysdale and Manson, when they were put together, became the top shutdown pair for the Ducks. They're playing against the opposition's best players on a nightly basis, which when you mentioned that, they've kind of slowed the game down a bit and they've got a bit more of low event game happening. That makes sense because they're not taking as many risks. They're not getting the puck as often. And when they do get it, it's, okay, we've got to keep things under control here. We're going to start a breakout, and we're going to transition slowly out of our own zone because we've probably been hemmed in our own zone for the last couple minutes here. And so it makes sense that the numbers have taken a hit and kind of the game has shifted the way it has, because before, I can't exactly remember who he was playing with when he first got called up, but when he originally got called up, he was not part of that.
Wasn't he playing with Shattenkirk? I thought he was playing with Shattenkirk when he first...
I think so. But that might have been on the power play. I'm trying to remember exactly who he was with. But either way, he was not the go-to guy when he first got called up. And the game shifted for him when he got switched with Josh Manson, because he was asked to do something different. When he first came up, it was, go out there, skate your ass off, you can create chances, do what you do best. And then Hampus Lindholm goes down for the rest of the season. Jamie Drysdale looks comfortable, starting to get more shifts on the penalty kill. They're starting to use him in a more defensive role to see how he can do there. All of a sudden now he's thrust into this shutdown role with Josh Manson, where he has to completely change the way he plays to fit what the team is asking him at that point. So, I think it's a bit weird already to play Drysdale with Manson as two righties when you have two lefties playing together in Fowler and Larson. I feel like that's a bit weird. I feel like you could shift Jamie Drysdale to the right and take a bit more care on how you're handling his minutes, but he's shown that he can do it, and I think that's the thing. I mean, obviously, when Zegras has been up, there's been a significant amount of care in terms of how they've handled him, how they've handled his deployment, and everything like that. For Jamie Drysdale, it's like, oh, we're going to send you out there and you're going to be our number one guy with Josh Manson. You're going to play against the opposition's best players, and we're going to treat you like you've been here for the last couple seasons, which is fine. Like, I have no issues with that. But I would love to see him on the right side a bit more, and in maybe a role where, especially in 14 games into his NHL career, where he could express some of that flair that he has to his game, where he really can't when he's being tasked to be a kind of a shutdown defenseman with Josh Manson. on a team that's very, very weak on with the defensemen they have in the lineup on a nightly basis. I don't know who you would play with at that point, and whether it's with Cam Fowler, which could be absolute chaos at that point. If it's Jacob Larson that he could play with, I really don't know. Or Hayden Fleury, that could be an interesting pairing of Fleury and Drysdale, but that would just recently develop with Fleury only coming in at the trade deadline. So I'm not sure how they would want to go with this, but at least for the last couple games here of the season, I'd like to see him shift back over to the right and maybe not be relied upon to be that shutdown defenseman for the rest of this year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think, acknowledging that he's on his offside and that his role has changed kind of covers a lot of it. But I also think the fact that they were willing to play him on his offside is a major vote of confidence. I really do. And I think that is more than anything going to be the takeaway from this season for him, is that, when it got down to it, they played him against high-end competition on his offside as the youngest player in the NHL, who was already an undersized, skilled defenseman.
I don't know. Does it really matter what hand they are as far as playing the off wing and things like that? I just don't ever see that really being that big of a handicap for players. I mean, I guess maybe the low end skilled players, maybe they got to make quicker, decisions. So they just got to kind of, it's a little bit easier to ease out of the zone under pressure. But I think for most players now, I don't think that it's all that much more difficult to play your off wing. It's just maybe a little bit of getting used to. Maybe that's about it. But I always like, oh no, you got to do a right and a left, a right and a left, a right and left. I was like, oh no, just put whoever matches up well, who plays well with that player, and then put them together. I think chemistry is more important than what handedness they are, or trying to shoehorn them into that. We got a left on left and right on rights, and that's it. I don't know. That's my thought.
Yeah, I have less of an issue with him playing on the right than I do playing with Josh Manson and being tasked in the role that he's been tasked in. I love that they're showing the responsibility to put him there, that they feel comfortable with him being that guy, that he's arguably the second best defenseman on this team, that he really took Cam Fowler's spot with Josh Manson to be that guy, and that they've forced him to play on the left to take over that spot from Cam Fowler. For me, I just want to see him maybe in a lesser role, just to see if maybe he'll break out offensively and have a bit more of that flair and that ability to kind of jump up in the rush more often than he has. I mean, he did it a couple times in this game, even being on that kind of demanding top pairing and having to play against the opposition's best players. I would just like to see maybe a little bit of a calmer finish to his season rather than throwing him to the fire and saying this is how you're going to end the year. You're going to play 24 minutes a night against the opposition's top players. I would maybe like to see maybe the last 3 or 4 games of his season where he becomes maybe that second pairing guy, and whether it's with Fowler or Fleury, he just kind of gets less tough matchups and can kind of express himself a bit more offensively, so we can see a bit more of that to end the year like we did when he first came up. I just feel like it's a lot to ask for him to do that and be this guy that is essentially what Hampus Lindholm is when he's in the lineup. And I know a lot of it has to do with injuries, and I'm sure next season he's not going to have to be that guy for Anaheim unless Josh Manson is moved out. But, I think that's the big thing for me. Like, I have no issues with him playing on the right side. If that's where they want to put him, I'm kind of with Jay there. Like, I know Drysdale's done that in the past, whether it be with Canada or with Erie. Like, he can do it. He's proven he can do it. And he's skilled enough where it really doesn't change much for him. He can execute a pass on his backhand just as well as he can on his forehand. And he's a good enough skater that it doesn't take long for him to shift the puck to the strong side and get it up the ice and get a first pass out. So I'm not too worried about him being on the left side of the ice as much as I am him having that type of responsibility this early on in his career, where we don't get to see that kind of ease transition into being that type of guy.
No,
cool.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would be interested in putting him with Fleury, so.
Yeah, I hope we see that. That would be nice. I mean, I feel like they complement each other pretty well. And Fleury is a decent skater for his size at 6'4", but he's a bit more of a stay-at-home, physical type defenseman. I think he frees up a bit of space for Drysdale. And, I know Fleury himself has been playing 18, 19, 20 minutes a night, but if it's, I know Lindholm's not coming back, but even if it's Fowler and Manson for the last bit of the season here, it doesn't matter if they're bad or not. They've been bad in the past, but every pairing they're going to throw out there essentially is not going to look too great for the rest of the year. Put Fowler and Manson back together and use them as kind of that top pairing and just see how Fleury and Drysdale could do. And then who cares what that bottom pairing looks like? It's likely going to be Larson and Welinski or Larson and Shattenkirk, but I would love to see Fleury with Drysdale for a couple games here to end the year just to see if they can get something going.
Yeah, sorry. I think it makes the most sense, especially with who's left. I think ultimately the one you want to play in with is Lindholm. I think Fleury is a little bit of Lindholm-esque in his style of play. I think he's a little bit of a better skater. But I definitely think that's the guy going forward that you want him playing with, unless you have somebody else you want to bring up who you think can play better with him. But I don't know why you think that, since he's really probably the best right-handed guy in the system right now, and I don't know that my guy's ready yet. So.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. We've talked a lot of topics on the show, but among the chat, the topic of the show has been your sweater.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Is it your grandma's?
No, it's just a sweater.
If you didn't come out to the show live, or if you haven't seen the video version of the show, you can just kind of scroll through the chat, and it's probably been mentioned over 100 times throughout the show tonight. So
it's my meat boss.
I had to bring it up before we got to the end of the show. I have nothing wrong. I think it's a great sweater.
I was thinking about it too, and I was like, I should probably bring that up. Well, nah, I won't do that to Steven, but since it's already there.
Yeah, the sweater's been accused of quite a lot of bad things.
It's a long list of things it's been accused of on this show. But that would do it for the post-game show for today. I know Steven and I are hopping on an interview with Josh Bell from FC Hockey tomorrow. We're going to be looking forward to the draft and who the Ducks could get with their potential top 5 pick, as well as some of their other picks later in the draft and into the second and third round as well. So we'll be covering kind of a early draft preview with that one, because I know a lot of people are trying to find some positives in what's a down stretch here for the Ducks. So that'll be a fun one, right, Steven, to look ahead to the draft and look at some of the new superstars we could bring into the team.
All hope is dead, Eddie. There's nothing to be excited about. No, it'll be fun. Josh is a good guy. He's a smart guy, so it'll be good to talk to him, and we'll test him, see how much he knows. We'll make him talk about guys in like the 8th or 9th round. So
it'll be a good lead up. We always have a draft preview and review show, so a nice little early draft coverage here. I know we're planning on setting up a expansion draft coverage show in the next couple of weeks here, where we can kind of do a deep dive on who we all think the Ducks should protect and who they will protect and who will be exposed and who we think Seattle will eventually take. So that will be a show that we have planned. And then as for the next post-game show, which would be slated for Saturday, just figuring out the details on terms of who's available for that show and if we're going to be able to put one out. If not, then the interview that Steven and I have with Josh will be taking its place for Saturday if we can't have a post-game show. If not, you'll just have both. You'll have the post-game show on Saturday and the interview to listen to. So we'll keep you posted on who's available for that show and if we're able to go live for that one.
I probably won't be there. I have to knit a sweater to match Steven's.
Whenever we do the next Pucks and Brews, we all have to come in matching sweaters to Steven's.
We do. It's so cold in here.
All All right, well, appreciate everybody who came out live to the show. Also to everybody who's listening to us to the next day, because I know a lot of these run late, so obviously everybody can't make it out. But if you are listening to this after the fact, give it a shot if you ever have the chance to come out to one of the live shows. It's always a lot of fun. We always love engaging with people live during the shows as well. So that'll do it for tonight, and we'll see you on Saturday, guys. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
420.